Welcome to Freedom Talk, everybody. I'm pleased to welcome Kalen Dalmeda here from Turning Point's Frontlines. Welcome, Kalen.
Kelly, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Kalen, it's so great to have you on. I'm really excited to hear more about your experiences. I understand you do on-the-ground reporting for Turning Point USA, and I've got to watch a little bit of the footage. Tell us about what you do.
Yeah, so in 2019, I got involved. That's when I started getting involved in conservative media. And in 2020, when the George Floyd riots began, I covered my first riot, and that was in Los Angeles. From that point forward, I started covering basically everything around the country in terms of all of that civil unrest throughout 2020. And that took me from places to like the Chaz in Seattle, to Kenosha, where that incident with Kyle Rittenhouse happened. It took me to DC and just all over the country. And so throughout that entire year, I really grew as a on-the-ground reporter and began really specializing and focusing on what was happening in Portland specifically. Night after night, maybe for over 100 nights in a row, there was riots of, hundreds of people in Black Bloc, Antifa militants, BLM militants. And so I would go undercover, I would embed with them. And that's what I was doing in 2020. And from that point forward to now, I was working as an EMT. It was an EMT for 7 years. And so I did both at the same time, and I would try to get out there and report and cover things to share the truth of what was going on. And then last year in September, I came to Turning Point to work for Frontlines, and I do pretty much the same thing, but our latest project that we finally launched is the Frontlines Child Safety Unit. And basically we hunt online child predators and confront them. And what we try to do is get them arrested, and we're looking for a conviction.
Gosh, I spent a lot of my childhood in Oregon. My mom's side of the family's from there. I remember Portland used to be just a beautiful city. What is Portland like now? I mean, in recent days?
It's falling apart. The downtown area is completely a shell. It's just a shell of what it may have been, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And it's just homeless people. I can't tell you how many times within the first 10 minutes of showing up in the city, you'd see a naked man running through the street from a prostitute. You know what I mean? That's just the level of, it's just fallen from grace, that city.
Yeah, right.
I'll put it that way.
Degradation of the city. It's been degraded. It used to be called the City of Roses, and we used to go down to Powell's bookstore down there. And so what was your experience how did you get in and embed yourself in, say, Antifa? How do you gain their trust?
Essentially, they are very hyper aware of who's around them. And so when it comes to having very close personal relationships with them, that's extremely difficult to do. When it came to embedding in large crowds, that's much easier because then they don't know who's around them. And it becomes even easier when their attention is focused on fighting with law enforcement. And so I knew that in situations where they were fighting with law enforcement, those would be the best times to document, because they're not concerned about, well, who might be filming me, who has a camera out. And that's when I would get most of those viral clips. It does become more challenging in those smaller settings, as I said. But there would be times where, it's maybe just me and 20 other people all dressed in black bloc, and they have no idea who I am and I don't know who they are. And the guy comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, do you want a paint bomb?" And it's like, well, what is that? And basically they were carrying around emptied out light bulbs with heat shrink on it filled with paint. And so if law enforcement came, they could hit them with the paint bomb. And those are the types of things that you'd see in like a smaller setting. But in other things, you kind of pretend that you're fighting the same fight that they're fighting. And you have to do things like create decoy phones and all of that so that you're not giving away your personal information, but you're also providing them with enough so that they feel like you're a real person.
Yeah, and I've known people who've been embedded on a digital level and gotten into some chats. And did you see any evidence, or do you have just a feeling that there are feds embedded in those groups?
I believe there is feds embedded in those groups. I don't know for certain. I've never been able to confirm, other than in 2020, toward the end, they stopped going out and rioting in Portland because there actually was feds embedding with them. So I don't know who those people would be, but I do know that almost every political or politically motivated group of people is has some sort of law enforcement watching them and potentially has someone embedded with them.
And I know this is a bit of a judgment call, but some of the things you saw, whether it was in person, also on television, do you believe that between Antifa and BLM, and there's a lot of mixing going on there. I'm sure a lot of Antifa was involved. A lot of Antifa was involved in BLM. But did this rise to the level of insurrection?
Absolutely, it was absolutely an insurrection. It was happening all over the country. It ended up costing $2 billion worth of damage throughout the nation, and people seem to forget that hordes of these people went to the White House, and they were rioting on the White House lawn, and they burned down a small building. And for some reason, that's never been considered an insurrection, right?
Yeah, it's very strange. It's a two-tiered justice system. In fact, I'm writing a series about lawfare and about what we can do about it and how we can respond. And these are certainly times that we haven't seen before. So you were with Antifa in Portland, but then you went to Chaz or CHOP in Seattle, correct?
Yeah, that was the first place that I went in the Pacific Northwest. Right after the riots in LA, we heard, hey, there's this autonomous zone being set up in Seattle. And so we went up there, and it was pretty interesting. The whole, few blocks of this area surrounding a park and the police station. So there was a police station that was completely overrun. They blocked off like 6 blocks, and they just took over the whole place. No law enforcement in or out. And during the day it's fine, but at night you have a lot of the more dangerous individuals, which is what I experienced, because I was there sort of in the early morning hours, 1:30 a.m. And I was just waiting to see if anything interesting would happen. And sure enough, I ended up getting assaulted and attacked, and they tried to actually catch me down the street. I ran out of the place after being assaulted by someone named Dewan. And so I run down the street, and 3 people are trying to stop me and pull me back and tell me that I need to go with them for interrogation.
Jeez. And how were you assaulted?
The guy told me that I needed to give him my phone so that he could see my camera roll because I was filming this supposed warlord named Raz Simone. And I told him, no, I'm not giving you my phone. And so he started punching me in the back of the head and hitting me, and he wouldn't let go of my jacket. And a crowd formed. And eventually, a very large man, thank God for him, he got the guy off of me. And so I took off. And this story is actually in Jack Posobiec's book, The Antifa, because Jack Posobiec was actually, I was with him when that was happening. So.
Oh, really? He was in there with you? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have that book. I got a signed copy from Jack Posobiec, I think at America Fest this last year. That's just, it's mind blowing. And, you know, I've had on the 20-year veteran of the FBI here. I've written a lot about the two-tiered justice system, but you've seen it with your own eyes. I mean, what did the police do? I mean, my recollection from the news is that they just basically gave up that part of the city.
Essentially, yeah, they did not go in there for, you know, a while. It took a while before there was plans to even go in there and try to clear the place out, because they were obviously met with extreme violence, you know. So it eventually they were able to take back the precinct and that whole area. But for a good chunk of time, maybe a month, it was totally out of their hands.
So since our government is so fair and consistent with justice, I'm just going to assume that these people who did this violence, who took over an area that were involved in this insurrection, are sitting in a gulag, much like the January 6ers.
Are they, or are they not?
No, I'm being sarcastic. But yeah, I mean, I think we all know the answer. But I seem to recall at that time that you had some pretty prominent people posting bail for some of those characters, getting them out of jail. Did you see any, you might say, recidivism or turning people out of the jails and putting them back on the street?
Yeah, that's always what happens. And that's how I know it wasn't none of those, you know, thousands of people traveling all over the country doing these riots. None of that was organic. It takes a lot of money to be able to do that. That's why we haven't seen it since. And there was tons of politicians whose names I can't remember right now, but you know, there was a lot of people going on social media and they're saying, hey, if you're protesting for the George Floyd riots, for justice and for this and for that, all under the guise of these noble causes or seemingly noble causes, we'll post bail if you get arrested. And so people were just going out and doing anything they could possibly do to wreak havoc and getting away with it. And there's a lot of DAs who weren't prosecuting anything.
Jeez. It's just shocking what's happening in this country. It kind of leaves me speechless. But by the way, Jack Posobiec, I want you on the show. I've been chasing him for a long time, and he's pretty elusive. I mean, he's a busy guy, but I know he has a background in well, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but insurgency, counterinsurgency, those are some of the types of things. I believe he was in the Navy. But what was it? I want to ask two questions. First, what was it like to work with Jack Posobiec? And second, when did you sort of wake up that this wasn't just a virus, that there was something nefarious going on?
I think initially it hit. I mean, I was working as an EMT during that whole time. And so me just not being very trusting of media or government or public officials, you know, in general, like I go, there's something else going on here. There is a plan afoot, and never, ever have we ever had to lock ourselves in our homes for 2 weeks to slow the spread of this supposed super virus that, for whatever reason, they're saying presents as any symptom you could think of, right? It's like, if you have this symptom or that symptom, and it's like, okay, that could be the common cold, or that could be anything. Oh, you all of a sudden have COVID. And so they implemented these authoritarian lockdowns, and I was keen to it right away.
I was as well. I was working at the time uh, for a medical education company that was nationwide. I became editor in chief of their medical publication, and I saw some things going out there that were decidedly unscientific, and sort of put two and two together. But I think it was a process of time to realize, to make some of the connections. So working with Jack Posobiec, did he offer insights due to his training? What did you learn from working with Jack?
Well, when I say Jack Posobiec was there, I went to Chaz, and I had he just happened to be there, and he knew some of the other people that I was with already. And so, because I had started my independent news outlet, and I knew that Jack was friends with the CEO of the company that I started with him, I said, "Hey, Mike," and he goes, "Oh yeah, I know Mike." And so, we were kind of just in the same group. And then later, when I went on my own to Chaz at like 1:30 a.m., we ran into each other. And so Jack was there. We were all sitting together, the three of us. I think his brother was there too. And, that's when I was assaulted. So he was there, but having a working relationship, I would say that's not exactly what it was.
I have to applaud you for your bravery, Kalen, and embedding yourself like that. Um, not everyone could do that, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry you've been assaulted. I think more than once, and it's interesting because at the time that was going on, we had a family coffee shop in Tucson, and this couple showed up, two Black women, and they came in the shop, and we had a really nice discussion, and they looked familiar, and then I realized that one of them had been following us and commenting on Instagram, and they had a really interesting story because they had been in Chaz and shop, and they were behind Black Lives Matter, but they pretty quickly realized that there was a lot of hatred behind this movement, that it wasn't about liberation, and they started to realize it really was a Marxist uprising. So actually, a lesbian Black couple left Chaz and came through. They were moving near us, and they came through to visit us. And I just thought it was very authentic and honest that they would see it for what it was. And I know one of these people, the one I recognized, is in an industry where she can't really speak out about it, so she kind of holds these things close to the chest. But do you have concerns about your safety? Do you feel like you're being targeted by Antifa because of your involvement?
So there was a time when Eugene Antifa actually doxed me. They, sourced a lot of publicly available information, and put a giant thread out about who I am and who I know and what I do and where I might be living and all of that. And so for a long time, I was pretty concerned that if I went to the wrong event to cover, that I might be found. And, I did also have the FBI contact me earlier this year because I was in Georgia, and there is a lot of radical anarchist, Antifa types down there. I went to cover this Cop City is what they're calling it. It's a training facility for cops that's going to be built outside of Atlanta. And all of these, radicals were protesting there, and they went through the city a little bit and destroyed it. Luckily, Atlanta PD doesn't mess around, so that didn't last long. But I posted my report of the damage the next day, and someone put out like a hit. They said, if you see this guy down here, green light, So it was a veiled threat that the FBI got a tips from somebody out there who cares. And, they said, hey, there's a credible threat. And, that's part of the work, right?
Very interesting. Do you believe that Antifa is very much a threat to the security and sustainability of the United States, or are they more provocateurs and troublemakers?
I think it's both. I think it's both. And I think that in the larger machine, they are tools to cause destabilization, to cause chaos.
Yeah, but maybe for larger forces, they're sort of the militant arm for more powerful people behind the scenes, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been a dad for about 23 years. I have 5 kids from 23 to 8 years old. Fatherhood has always been very important to me. But over the time I've been a father, the world has gone mad. Judeo-Christian values are under serious attack and morality has been turned upside down. I'm sure you've noticed there's a war against the family, and especially against fathers. Sick, twisted ideologies are targeting our children through Hollywood, music, and even in our schools, many of which have become radical left-wing indoctrination centers. Our culture needs good, strong fathers more than ever. That's why Freedom Talk is thrilled to announce a new seminar that will give you the guidance you need. It's called Fathering in a World Gone Mad. We've brought together remarkable male role models to share their wisdom on the art of fatherhood. Eric Metaxas, Victor Marks, Sheriff Mark Lamb, Dave Scarlett, and more lead an all-star lineup that will guide you through the pitfalls of postmodernism and Marxist ideology so that you can bring your children up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Hosted by yours truly and Pastor John Amonchukwu, Fathering in a World Gone Mad includes a free copy of my book, Guidebook for a Son, a study guide, and opportunities for you to ask your most pressing questions and get the help you need. Purchase access now and watch the series on your timeline beginning September 15th, 2023. Plus, you get a free digital copy of my book, Guidebook for a Son. Every dad needs a guidebook, and I've got one for you. I think you're going to enjoy it. To register, just go to realfreedomtalk.com. That's realfreedomtalk.com and click on the Fathering Seminar tab. We hope to see you there.
From the moment a doctor placed you in my arms, I cried, giving glory to God. The passion I feel inside, emotions I couldn't hide. The look in your mom's eye, it was so beautiful, I ain't gon' lie. In such a still, quiet moment, set our hearts on fire. It's the epitome of purpose, blessing to cover curses. Hope in all of my searches, I could die for you, be certain. Every drop I bleed is worth it. This moment is so perfect, so real, so cherished. I'm healed, so nourished. No place I wouldn't go, nothing I wouldn't do. We shall call her Azariah. I've given this name to you, cause it means that God helps. And I knew that was so true as I sang this song to you. Always forever, closer together, I will be with you.
Thanks for sharing those experiences. I think a lot of people wouldn't want to be in the middle of that, but they want to know what's going on. But now you're focused on locating and confronting radical far-left professors, corrupt politicians, and that includes exposure of Joe Biden. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I wasn't. I had this plan to, confront Joe Biden because he was going to Irvine, California, and so I go to this. It's a small gathering, and I think that was part of, what made it possible. But I wanted to confront him about his daughter's diary, and I mean, there was more security there than I had ever seen anywhere in my life. And they're pretty intimidating guys. You get in there and they go through all your stuff. And, there's guys everywhere watching you, guys with guns on the rooftops and stuff, of course. And at the end of his event, he was there meeting with people, little meet and greet, taking photos and stuff. And I was able to get up right next to him. And I didn't notice, but there was a young girl right in front of me. And so I talk to him and I say, "Hey, how you doing? I'm taking a video." And he goes, "Hey, what's up?" And he gives me a pat on the chest. And he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I say, "Oh, I'm taking a video." He's like, "Ah, I don't want to take a video. Let's take a picture." And the Secret Service is like, "Hey, no filming, no filming." And so he moves on to this young girl and he creeps his hand up on her shoulder and he starts telling her in her ear, "Hey, no dating." He immediately starts talking about relationships and dating. No dating until you're 30, and it's just very odd to see a child and just start giving them dating advice and touching them on the shoulder. And the girl looks visibly uncomfortable. You can see this video, it's pinned on my Twitter. And that video went super viral around the world. It's actually blocked in some countries on Twitter, but yeah, that was the exposure of Joe Biden on my end.
Wow.
And yeah, so we do also confront radical professors. We confront school board meetings, and yeah, now we're going after online child predators.
Wow. I'll have to talk to you about that later because I'm definitely doing some things regarding the school boards and teachers who were targeted as supposed domestic terrorists. In fact, I don't know if you recall that there was a school board in Vail, Arizona, where over 200 parents showed up. The school board either fled or hid, and somebody started swearing in parents who had attended that school board meeting. It went viral. I mean, it was on Dinesh D'Souza's show and Dan Bongino and things like that. But that was one event that really started the ball rolling for these school board meetings. Had you heard about that one?
I probably did at the time, but how the news cycle is, just so much happens in such a short period of time. I probably memory hold it. Is this related to the individual who was making lists of parents who he was concerned were problematic? And
I know what you're talking about.
Is that related?
No, that's my friend Amanda Ray up in Scottsdale. Vail is down on the edge of Tucson, and what happened in Vail there was prior to what happened with Amanda. But yeah, that was concerning. That was troubling, and we saw a lot of this kind of behavior in Arizona. In fact, I've been involved in it because I would go to some of these school board meetings, and I was profiled and targeted, and actually had a school board PR director tell the sheriff's department, "Hey, to watch out for me, and I'm going there to cause trouble, and I just want attention," and all these things. Interestingly enough, the lieutenant in charge then hung up the phone and called his guys and said, "Hey, you're going to see Kelly Walker. He's a big guy. He's going to be outspoken, but he's not a threat at all." So kudos to him for going against that, because honestly, parents have a right to go and express their grievances. Tell me what you've seen in regards to that, in regards to how parents have been treated when they go forward and say, like, well, we don't agree with the vaccine mandates in schools. We don't agree with CRT. Have you been to some school board meetings? Have you seen some of those things?
I have attended at least one where I ended up speaking myself, but what I experienced there was, everyone was speaking, and the people who were sitting in the room attending and watching the school board meeting, listening to the speakers, there was a lot of instigators. There are a lot of far left radicals who were snickering and, making comments. At least that's what I experienced when I spoke. Just a lot of people rolling their eyes, and there was some comments made to me, so I imagine that it's very similar, but I haven't seen anything yet that was like directly from the school board, saying anything disparaging from people who are giving their concerns during their time to speak.
Yeah, actually, Amanda's lawyer is Harmeet Dillon. You probably heard her name.
Yeah, I have, definitely.
Yeah, she's represented some big names. But what we saw in our area was what I experienced being profiled. I was arrested in September of 2020 for speaking against the county setting up our business and the way they were treating us and the threats and doxing and everything that they precipitated by lying, saying that we were out of compliance with the county COVID regulations when actually we had passed our inspection. So I showed up to speak. I was invited by one of the Board of Supervisors, and within 30 seconds handcuffed and arrested, which is very odd. That was dismissed within a matter of, I think it was maybe a couple of weeks, but I was arrested again almost a year later to the day for standing up for the kids in our school system. And then a mother in Sahuarita, which is close to Tucson, close to Vail, was her husband, and her teenage daughter were arrested, handcuffed, and put into police cars because they questioned the quarantining of her daughter, and they dropped charges on the teenager, but they ended up putting that school mom in prison for 5 days to quote unquote teach her a lesson. So I just want to tell you that I think some of that's still going on. I still talk to some of those people, and I've been talking to some members of Congress about this. And I do believe, they've got a lot on their plate right now, but they're going to get to that. And I've had a high-ranking congressman tell me, yeah, they want to investigate all of that. So I appreciate what you're doing. And I know it's probably a little different because I don't know if you're going to the public schools, but tell us what you're seeing with far left professors. And are you're probably seeing the Confucius Institutes, that the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated our education system, but overall, it's Marxist infiltration. Tell us what you're learning about the far left professors and programs.
So I have a couple of experiences that I'd like to talk about. First, we'll talk about the Professor Harris Kornstein at the University of Arizona. He is, I forget what he teaches, probably a lot of evil things, but I believe he's a homosexual and he is a drag queen. And he has written 2 or 3 children's books. I know one is called The Hips on the Drag Queen Go Swish, Swish, Swish.
Gosh.
And he's also authored or co-authored a paper called Drag Pedagogy, in which they talk about their belief that they need to sort of influence and capture the minds of young children because their minds are more open to suggestion and their minds are more creative. And that way they can propagate more of this degeneracy into the future. And so I confronted him. I said, what is this all? Can you tell me about this? Why do you think kids need to be exposed to drag? Why do you think that that's okay? Why do you need to perform in drag in front of children? What does that do for you? Are you sexually attracted to minors? I asked him these questions, and of course he didn't want to respond to anything, which looks really horrible. And so that was one of the people, notably, that I confronted. Second, there is a group called IMF, the International Marxist Tendency, and they run Marxist clubs at universities and disseminate, reading material, literature. And I went undercover in Minnesota to one of their group or club meetings or seminar sort of things. And what I learned is that the traditional Marxists, they're not in line with this intersectional social Marxism that we have here in the United States.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, they are members of that community, but they're not standing up and preaching that the intersectional issues are the most important. They still hold true to their belief that this is a class struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie.
This is a little mind-blowing. We're talking about conservative Marxists here. I mean, conservative in the sense that they want to hold to what they
Yes.
knew before. Like, you got progressive Marxists and conservative Marxists. What an odd juxtaposition that is. But I interject, so go ahead.
Yeah. And it really reveals how sinister the social Marxism is, right? Because previously it was, okay, the workers versus the oligarchs, and it was very simple. Now, and I think it has a lot to do with the demographics of the US being diverse, everyone is divided based upon everything: sex, race, religion, whatever your skin color, language you speak,
Yeah.
Your gender, and just everything under the sun.
Absolutely shattering the order of society.
Right. And so I went to their little hangout after the event was over, and I learned that this transgender Marxist was all excited because he had been communicating with a 13-year-old about, becoming a Marxist.
Wow.
And, how Stalin was based and all this kind of stuff. So this, the frustrations, right? These are all young people, and they see problems in the world. And here comes this ideology. It's really a pipe dream of here's how we can fix everything. And, I asked them questions such as, what is it going to take for the revolution to actually be successful? And they go, well, it needs to be global. It needs to be international. Like, okay, well, good luck with that. And let's say it is successful. How explain to me how a planned economy works. Explain to me that how is everyone going to receive the same wage, and at the same time we're going to have price controls on things like a bottle of water or toilet paper. So, and then at the same time they're saying that they can reduce the work week to maybe 3 days. So it's like
jazz.
So it's like no one's working, and there's price controls on things. So it's very bizarre. It's very bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I know that one of their talking points is America was never great, supposedly, and communism is wonderful. But when you look at the facts, this is just one small little diagram that I looked up. I would say communism and socialism combined have slaughtered more people in the 20th century than any other philosophy or worldview or political system. And it's crazy. It's crazy that they are praising someone like Joseph Stalin, who killed many more times the number that Hitler killed. He was a psychopath and a mass murderer. You know what else is interesting to me, Kalen? If you dig into this, at first, the communists in the Soviet Union legalized homosexuality, legalized abortion, did all of those things, used those people as activists, and then later on made them illegal and persecuted those people. And that's the way they work. They'll use the activists for their own purposes, but they're not interested in human rights. They're interested in power.
Right. So anything that people these subverters, right, who seek to subvert society, they view people who diverge from traditional societal norms as tools to be utilized to start to unravel the fabric of said society. Mm-hmm. And so once society is unraveled and those who seek power finally attain it, they take those people who are likely to cause problems in the new regime and they get rid of them. Because as soon as they realize that those that enlisted them to cause problems sold them a lie, they're obviously going to have problems with it, so they have to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So how do we tell young people? I want everybody who has a young person who's watching this, who's interested in Marxism, thinks it's cool or sexy or whatever, to go back to Kalen's comments and look at this and say, people who really care about you are concerned because history has shown that they will use you as a pawn. They'll use your youth and your vibrancy, your optimism, to get you to be a foot soldier for something that time after time after time has led to mass murder. And I know that's very difficult for someone who's, 14, 15, 16 out there. And it's also difficult to make that link between this and the degeneracy of sexual standards in this country, the breakdown of Judeo-Christian values. But I can guarantee you, and if anybody wants to talk about this, if they want to reach out, this drag queen movement, the transgenderism movement, they are all classical tools of Marxism, I think, applied in a different way. But these things have been done before. You can read about how this was done in the Soviet Union. You can read about how some of these things were done in communist China. And what happens is they end up eating their own. That they'll break down, destabilize the society. They'll use the young people to do it. And the end is always the same. So how do you see people justifying this now? I mean, you hear people saying, well, Marxism, communism, they're great. They just didn't do it right the first time. What kind of excuses do you hear?
Well, they always say that there has never been a communist country. That's their favorite one to go to. And they say, and that's based on their belief that it's never been done correctly. And so they'll say, well, it's never actually been done. And I say, well, hey, you want to try something that doesn't even exist. And so you have no proof that it would ever actually work. And
yet they idolize the architects of these movements as wonderful, like, oh, Lenin, Stalin, they were great. But what are they, idolizing failures? I mean, what do they have to go on,
Right. And, when it comes to where you find these people most, they always parasitically attach themselves to a society that already has been built. It's like, how come they're not down in, some of these, undeveloped countries building things up and starting from the bottom? They always come in at the peak of a society, unravel it, destroy it, and then attempt to seize power and control.
Yeah. They don't build anything. They just destroy. The left does. Let's pivot a little bit, because this Christopher Carey fellow, I saw your video where you're tracking down people who are trying to lure young people to molest them.
Kalen Almeida, reporter for Frontlines. Over the last year, my team and I have worked tirelessly to develop methods to proactively protect children from online sex predators. 23-year-old Christopher Carey, a transgender online sex predator from Hastings, Nebraska, who also goes by the names Amelia, Avery, and Brittany, believed he was communicating with a 12-year-old girl from Lincoln, Nebraska. Not only did Carey discuss cuddling, making out, sleeping together, sex, and his penis size, but he expressed to our decoy his desire to travel with her hours away to a remote wilderness to spend time alone with her. On top of all this, Carey also tried to convince our decoy to pay for thousands of dollars worth of bikinis, dresses, high heels, perfume, makeup, and Victoria's Secret lingerie for him to wear. The video you're about to watch is the result of 6 months of work communicating with Carey.
I wasn't expecting you.
I know.
Why are you guys looking at me?
Yeah, that's what you thought it was. Listen, we got all the audio, we got all the chat logs, okay?
From what?
Come on, Chris, I'm talking to Allie. We're gonna talk about it, all right?
Oh my God. I'm just trying to have fun here. I am not going to jail. I hope not.
Well, we'll find out, okay? We'll find out.
What is this?
All right, well, listen, obviously, you've been talking to Allie. You already know, right? How old is Allie?
I'm not even with her. I already told her I don't want to talk to her due to her age.
Yeah, but you were talking to her last night about, sex
Oh my
and...
God, no.
You just got to know the pull-out game. Yeah, I've never actually tried to pull out. That's something I'm not very good at.
You said that your penis was too big for a condom.
That condom will not fit on my dick. I have actually tried before. It does not fit. My dick, when it's hard, is too big.
You wanted to take Allie to a dark place and make out?
We'd drive around. Go somewhere and we could go somewhere in the dark or something to make out and stuff.
A dark place? You wanted to sleep with her? You wanted to sleep with her. That's what you did. That's what you did. That's what you did, Chris. That's what you did, Chris.
Leave me alone!
Hey. Don't try it, buddy. Chris, if you run, this isn't going away. This isn't going away.
Leave me the alone,
Chris, this isn't going away. Do you hear me?
Leave me alone.
Look, dude, we just want to help you. Hey. Hey. It's not going away. You hear me? All right, Chris? Hey, listen. Look at me. Chris.
Get the away from me.
Here's license plate. I told you, Chris.
He committed a hit-and-run accident and fled the scene, at which point I bombarded his phone with voice and text messages, convincing Chris to meet up for a second time at Jared Fogel's favorite sandwich shop, Subway.
What would the right choice have been when you noticed how old she was?
I should have blocked her. I should have blocked her ahead of time.
Okay. And I can show you, if you want, where you said, you'd be willing to try a relationship and have to keep it a secret. Now look,
That's what she said.
No, that's what you said.
I don't even remember any of that.
You know, we'd have to keep it a secret until you were 19. You know that, right?
Well, I mean, you were basically grooming her.
No, I wasn't.
You were saying that you had to keep your relationship a secret. Did you want to give the relationship a shot?
I don't around with minors anymore.
Would you agree that pedophiles are disgusting?
Yes.
I've only had sex like twice. Been probably 2-3 years, so it's gonna be. I'm afraid of not timing it right. Yeah, we could French kiss, all that. Cuddle, sleep together in my car.
I've never
wanted to transition, right?
Yes, I'm going transgender. Yes.
So tell me about that. Like, tell me about why do you feel like that's the way for you to go right now? You're trying to work on yourself, you're trying to be a better person.
Because I'm already on the pills for that, to have the surgery this fall.
Yeah, but I mean, like, how'd you get to that? How'd you get to that place in your life? You know what I mean? When did you start feeling like that's what you should be doing?
Like a year and a half ago.
Really?
I've been working on it trying to get on the pills ever since. I just got on them a month ago.
So you want to grow tits?
Yes, and then I'm having the surgery after that.
So you're gonna remove your genitals too?
No, I'm gonna have it turned inside out. I already know what name and a lot of people have already calling me this, which is either Avery or Brittany.
Avery or Brittany. So you were calling her baby a lot and saying that you love her.
Oh my God.
But, I mean, that's what you said. So also, can I just ask why you Why you took a swipe at my buddy here and called him an N-word earlier?
Leave me alone!
Because that was
Because I was trying to get you guys to stop recording me. Well, oh my God.
they found you.
After the confrontation, Christopher Carey was cited by Hastings PD for the hit-and-run accident. Hastings PD had my team and I go to the police department and provide testimony of the confrontation, as well as the evidence we collected for the sting operation. Now we're going to place tons of pressure on Hastings PD, the detectives, and everyone involved to make sure Chris, the transgender racist pedophile, is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and justice is served.
So obviously we found Christopher Carey online on Instagram. Problem with Instagram is that it's full of accounts that post images and videos of children, and they're not necessarily pornographic images. A lot of times they're called like young models, and you just look at who's following those accounts. And that's how I found Christopher Carey, and he stood out because he had his full name on his Instagram profile. So I go, okay, this guy obviously is into young children. I've got his full name, which means I can find out his address and his phone number. And I have a decoy account. So, maybe I liked a comment or two of his, or maybe I liked a photo or two or his of with the decoy account, and a conversation began. And from that point, early on in the conversation, I let him know that I'm not an adult, I'm very young, almost 13 years old, and the conversation continued. It ebbed and flowed for a while. There may have been periods of time where we didn't speak at all. But once I decided, okay, it's time to go get this guy, then it was a very consistent amount of communication, which eventually turned into phone calls and planning to meet up and sort of discussing, what do we want to do? What do you want to do, Chris? And that's where you see, the audio, and he's talking about sex, and he talks about his transgender transitioning and how he wants to grow breasts. And he also wants our decoy to use the money that we said she saved from her allowance to buy him, bikinis and prom dresses and makeup and Victoria's Secret lingerie and high heels, and get his nails done and all this kind of stuff, and take her without her parents' permission into the wilderness to go hang out, or maybe take her to a dark place and cuddle and kiss and have sex, and that he can't use a condom because his genitals are too big, evidently.
Wow.
And so that conversation, or those conversations, took place over the course of a couple weeks, and we planned to meet up. And so we went to Nebraska, and he bailed the first day. He bailed. He wasn't where he said he was going to be. So we actually went to him, and then we confronted him in a Walmart. And that's, from that point forward is what we watched in the video. He actually got into a hit and run accident when he tried to escape, which is totally crazy. It just kept getting worse and worse. And as you saw in the video, he actually came back, right? He took off. We have no idea where he went. But I called him and I texted him, and I told him, Chris, I think we got off to the wrong start. Maybe we should try again. And I think it'd be in your best interest to meet up. You're really not in a good spot here, okay? But I think you should meet up with me because I know what the laws are, and clearly you don't. So he actually did meet up with us a second time. even after that had all just occurred. And right now, that case is sitting on the Adams County Attorney's Office desk with no prosecutor.
And yet they'll put a school mom in prison for 5 days for what she did was she said, I'm not leaving the school until you give me documentation of why you're quarantining my child, which the law states that misdemeanor trespassing or trespassing has to be denying a reasonable request to leave. And I would say it's not reasonable to use the police as security to eject someone without giving them the answers they're entitled to as a parent. And yet this person, there's no prosecutor. What was this? Was Christopher arrested?
No, he wasn't arrested. He was cited for the hit and run, but he wasn't arrested. And that's what's the issue with Nebraska, is that their laws are kind of difficult to work with when it comes to these sting operations, because they have to be law enforcement in order for this to be valid, I suppose. Something along those lines. And so because we're just citizens who are concerned in being proactive, it seems like the case is not really in our favor. However, if public pressure influences or persuades them to prosecute, it would set a precedent in Nebraska.
Wow. I'm going to have to look up a quote, and I believe it was Thomas Jefferson, but they said basically police don't have any more rights than we do. They're basically citizens with a badge. And why couldn't somebody make a citizen's arrest if you caught someone in a felony? I guess it depends on the particular state law. But if the police won't do their job, what can citizens do? I know publicizing this, do you expect any pushback in terms of defamation lawsuits or anything of that nature?
No, everything is true. Everything's completely factual and true. So I don't expect there to be any lawsuits coming from Christopher Carey at all.
Do you know Kaylee Kozak?
No, not
because
familiar.
you met her. I'll introduce you to her because she works on a lot of these things, and we've had myriad people on this show involved in these things. I'd like to make sure that you hook up. And I've had people contact me who actually hunt down these predators. They track them down, similar to what you're doing. And I'm not sure what their methods are, because one of them I'm still waiting to talk to him, but I have seen on his social media that he's gotten a number of convictions from that.
What's his name?
Well, let's see. On Instagram, it's Joshua Pickles. I don't know if that's a real name or not.
Yeah, actually, I think that he actually just followed me. Totally forgot that I need to send him a direct message on Twitter, I guess.
Yeah.
Instagram doesn't like him very much, so he's not allowed to DM on Instagram. But yeah, I just heard about him.
Yeah, he reached out to me and said we should talk. So, I mean, Freedom Talk, our purpose here is to restore American virtues, to uphold the values that we all hold dear. But definitely one of those is protecting our children. And one of those values is that children should not be sexualized, and that there needs to be an equal application of the law. And so when I see school parents being arrested, Christopher Wray designating school parents as terrorists, and then people like this going free, there's something definitely wrong. Have you ever spoken to Congress? Is that something you'd be interested in doing?
I haven't personally spoken to Congress. I've never even thought to do that.
Yeah.
But whatever is in the cards for me, as God has prepared work for us to do, that's what I want to be doing. So now that you say it, definitely maybe something that I think about doing.
Yeah. We will definitely keep in touch, and Freedom Talk will help in any way we can. We have a platform; it's growing. We're we're still pretty new. I started Freedom Talk. Oh gosh, I want to say maybe 2021, after being publicly arrested and getting more and more of a sense of what's going on in this country. So it's really great to make these connections and link arms and, stand up to this evil. So how do we win these battles? I mean, I know that's a big question. In a sense, you and I are foot soldiers in this fifth generation war, where we're working to save our country from all this infiltration, true insurrection. How do we win this? And what does that time frame look like?
Well, I think time is running out. I don't know how much time we have left, but it's not looking great. And of course, the 2024 election is coming up, and a lot of things will be determined by the winner of that election. But I think ultimately, the greater war is first one at home with the small battles. It starts with the family. Of course, all of this is predicated on people believing in Christ, and everything flows from that. Because what we see in this country is just a lot of people say they're a Christian, they don't, and they're not. And so, that influence of moral fiber only lasts so long. So starting with the family, starting with individual responsibility, integrity, and being educated on what the values are of a good America, a safe America, a strong America, is really important. And that way, when those battles come along, we're able to defend and fight back. So our battle starts at home, and then it goes on from there into the world. And so that's where I think everyone should start.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, there's a long road ahead of us.
It's not an overnight cure. And I can't agree with you more, Kalen, because there are a lot of people professing to be Christians, but I think it was Alexander Solzhenitsyn said there's a thousand little reasons people have for not getting involved, 1,000 quaint little reasons or something like that. And I see this definitely in the Christian community. And this is something, Eric Metaxas is going to be a part of this fathering seminar that we're just launching this week. And he has a book called A Letter to the American Church. And it's powerful because he talks about the apathy and unwillingness to get involved, and how that leads to some of these evils just taking place because people won't stand up to it. He talks about Dietrich Bonhoeffer and others who, as Christians, said, we have to be active. We have to be actively opposing that. That's what you're doing. It's what you're doing as part of, well, that's your job. That's something that we're doing with Freedom Talk, and this fathering seminar is going to be so helpful in that regard, because we've realized as well that we have to take the country over, or take the country back, I should say, one person at a time, one mind at a time, one household at a time. We have to be raising, and it's difficult, we have to be raising children with strong virtues. In fact, we just had a conversation with someone where their approach was basically, they're part of a homeschooling group and they want to insulate their children from all of this. And I understand that, but this person said there's a lot of fear in that community because they're wanting to keep everything out. But I said, I understand that you want to do that to the extent possible, but at some point you have to address this with your kids. And they have to develop, as they grow older, the moral courage to stand up against it. So I see sometimes an escapism, other times an embracing of these things, where you see so-called churches saying, oh no, God's transgender, like just horrible, blasphemous things, but somewhere in the middle, like Eric Metaxas said, out of 18,000 pastors in Germany back in Hitler's reign, there were a small portion on one side who stood strongly against it, a small portion who went along with the Nazis, but the majority were just going along to getting along, just keeping their heads low. So, I want to thank you for what you do, encourage you to keep it going. I know sometimes you'll get pushback from people who call themselves Christians. Oh, just leave it to the Lord, leave it to God, And or one thing Eric Metaxas brings up is people say, well, it's the end times, everything's falling apart. So in doing nothing, they sort of make that a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we had Michael Jones on from Inspiring Philosophy. He's a friend. He talks about prophecy not being absolute. It's more conditional based on how you respond. So literally, if you combine those two ideas, you say, okay, if you're not going to get involved, if you're not going to strive against evil, this will probably be the time this comes through. But it's not an absolute. If we get involved, if we push back, if we turn people's hearts, we don't have to see that destruction. I mean, am I making sense here? Does this resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Christians sometimes they are so. My pastor used to say, people are so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. And it's great to be focused on the kingdom of God, and being there. But while we're still here, Scripture instructs us to confront evil wherever it is.
It does.
And I don't think that anyone could make a case to say that they shouldn't, protect the innocent or defend their community from the evils that seek to destroy it. So
Yeah,
I think,
it's very interesting because I heard someone criticizing Bonhoeffer. They're a fan of Bonhoeffer, but they said, oh, he was involved in a plot to kill Hitler. It just dawned on me, what were millions of young men going overseas to do back then? Most of them Christians. They were going to kill Hitler. So aren't you glad we won World War II? I don't know, but I think, you get into theology here, but people forget, they see Jesus meek and mild, but he's returning with a sword. He's returning as a lion. Prior to Jesus being born, you had the Maccabees who forcibly pushed out Antiochus Epiphanes and these Syrian Greek forces that were desecrating the temple, trying to destroy the society. If it hadn't been for them, there would have been no Jerusalem receptive for Christ. And I think people take situational things from the Bible and apply it as a generality, but absolutely we stand up against evil. And I think, I'm getting off into the weeds here, but I think Jesus recognized that the Roman Empire was so vast and so huge that if people didn't go the extra mile, if they didn't turn the other cheek, they probably wouldn't be around for long. But also the Roman Empire had a stabilizing influence, and they actually allowed a certain amount of religious freedom. So in the context of the times, he was saying, go out of your way to show them your goodness, go out of your way to be cooperative. And what was the outcome of that? A majority of the Romans eventually embraced Christianity. But you go back a little before that with the Maccabees, and they had to physically push out some invading armies. And I hope people can see, instead of cherry picking scripture, they can go in and see that throughout the history of the Bible, there have been times when that violence is necessary, unfortunately. Do you see, because people are getting fed up, and I'm seeing more and more people saying we have to have violence, we have to rise up. Do you see that ever happening in this country? I think it's something we wouldn't want to see, but
I think that there's an interesting thing happening here because everything is so incremental. The way that the enemy works is always incremental. You take a little bit, we get just a little mad, and then they pull back. They take a little bit.
Yeah, they do.
We get mad, but not mad enough to go to war. And so seems to be the strategy, is taking a little bit, just enough to where we groan,
mm-hmm.
and then they pull back and we go, yeah, okay, well, if you do that again,
yeah,
we're going to have problems. And then they take a little bit more in a different way.
Yeah, Jordan
And
Peterson laid
yeah,
that out really well. And I hate to cut this off, but I have to jump on another interview in a few moments here. But I wanted to add that the moment people get angry enough to act on it, the other side will claim victims and portray them as the aggressors when really they're trying to defend their liberties. But Kalen, thank you so much. And we'll definitely do this again. And, offline, we'll talk and see how we can collaborate and link up in this. But I just thank you so much for what you're doing. And thank you for coming on Freedom Talk today. I feel like we could talk for hours, but just really appreciate you being here.
Sure, Kelly. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. And I'd be glad to come back on.
Great. We'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.